Well, good afternoon. My name is Jim Jordan, and I am one of the organists with the Arts Empowering Life Foundation. I want to thank you for actually being with us here this afternoon at what we call our Arts Speak lecture. And now this is a branch of the Arts Empowering Life Foundation's series called the Arts and Entertainment Lecture Series. So again, thank you for joining us. Now the exciting part. Today's lecture, I was thinking about how to introduce this man, Ēriks Ešenvalds. I called it an inspirational honor myself because we get the opportunity this afternoon, as with the name of this lecture being Inside the Composing Process, to somebody who not only produces it, but lives it. Ēriks is in Latvia, and you'll see him on the screen right now. Thank you for being with us, Ēriks.
Good afternoon, everyone.
And he is now 7 hours ahead of us. To say the least, he's one of the most sought-after composers on the planet. He is performed worldwide. His music, there's so much to say about it. I'm going to direct you to the link that's on our YouTube clip to actually look at his biography. He heads the Department of Composition at the Latvian Academy, and I must say any of those students who are working with him have a singular honor in what they are learning and who they are learning it from. But I want to give you a personal introduction. I had the joy of actually meeting Ēriks for the first time 2 days ago. We had kind of a pre-discussion about this talk. And after 40 minutes, I felt like I had known him my entire life. Part of that comes from having worked with the music that he has written, sung it, played it, and even helped teach it. But as we spoke, who I met, the man that I met, as we discussed not only his music, but how it came to be, what inspired him, and what relates him to you, me, and everybody else who hears his music, is exactly what we're going to be talking about today. So Ēriks, with that, I'm going to start off with a good old question that probably everybody would ask. How did you get started?
Jim, you know, I had never had such a honest, true, and such a long preface that you spoke about me. And I was just listening, and I started to count. It's not me. There have been people who have influenced me, you know, my teachers. And I just, as you were speaking about my career, I was just like counting in my memory all the teachers who have been a true blessing to me, you know. I had to learn so many things. And, you know, I was born in times when we were under the iron fence, Soviet Union, communism. So Latvia was, in total, it was around 50 years when Russia ruled over us. And I was born at that time, you know. And my mom, a music teacher at school, she decided to send me to children's music school, which was a school in afternoon every day. So, and I went and learned solfeggio, rhythmics, and also piano playing. And I remember when I was 10 years young, Whitney Houston was everywhere, you know, even in Soviet Union. And I loved her songs. The melody, this magical chain of harmonies. And as a good piano player, in age of 10, I learned her songs to play on the piano. just by listening to them, because in Soviet Union we couldn't buy sheet music of her songs. So just by listening, I found the beauty. So the secret was actually the wonderful chain of harmonies. Yeah, and I started to set the different order of the chords. Yeah, and I found that yes, this way the chords worked very well. The other way, it was more like wandering. Yeah, the story was not clear, directed to good direction. And so these first discoveries, they started to teach me compositional secrets. And
You know, Ēriks, you just said something I wish you'd expound upon for just a moment. You said if the chords went a certain way, the story didn't quite go correctly, didn't quite go right. So you associate story and harmonic language, harmonic movement.
Yes, because the chords, they create intensity. They have direction to the next step. Yeah, it's kind of development. And if you bring in chord which goes opposite, yeah, the intensity drops, the wandering starts, and you start to lose time. There is actually too much of time then, yeah, rather than going directly with passion towards the goal of every single phrase, towards the goal of single movement in a symphony, yeah, where is there is this climax, like in the golden section moment, for example. So, Whitney Houston didn't know that she was my first teacher, actually. And years later, when I already became a student at Music Academy in Riga, Latvia, there was one moment when I wanted to say thank you to Whitney. And I decided to arrange Amazing Grace for choir a cappella, and I also included a soprano solo there. That song was premiered by Riga Latvian Choir Kamar, who has won 3 European Grand Prix awards, and they sang that song beautifully. And now this song is also spread out, as you say, to every continent except Antarctica. And I had imagined that what if one day in a ceremony, in a concert, suddenly Whitney would be there and she would sing this solo and a choir would sing this arrangement. So I had a dream which didn't come true. Whitney passed away. But you see, it made me to think, even at those times when we have iron fence around us,
yeah,
we hardly know what's actually happening in that territory, how freedom can still reach the people. Freedom from outside in unguessable ways, it touches people's soul. And this was how Whitney became my first teacher in composition. It started in the age of 10.
Absolutely. Listening to you talk about it raised another thought in my mind. And that was that you're suffering out of no sheet music, the unavailability to you forced your ears to be able to take it in. You had, if you were going, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me if you were going to love this, be able to express already the music that was in you, that it was going to be your ears, your listening, that was going to really start it.
You're absolutely right. Yes, technically, my piano player skills, they helped me to practice on these chains of chords faster. I found them on the piano keys faster, yes. But philosophically, I had this longing for listening, for watching the nature around me, imagining things. Since my childhood years, when every weekend I spent in the farm of my grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I remember there were tough times suddenly, few years, when the economics were so bad that every citizen was given tickets for sugar, for butter, in limited amount, in limited period of time, yeah, and it was very tough and hard years, and it was my grandmother who had cow, 10 chickens, 2 pigs, farms for potato growing, tomatoes, cucumbers, strawberries, everything. So we worked there, my brother and I, and that was how she helped actually to feed the whole family in those times. And I remember once summer morning, there was a creek running through her farm, and on previous night we usually put a rope into that creek, you know, hoping that a fish will we will catch a fish in the morning. So, and I remember that one particular morning I woke up, I was like maybe age 6 years old, and I directly, with barefoot, I ran to the creek, and it was freezingly coldish water. and I was brave to dig, to walk towards that rope and to catch to see the fish. And you know, in that particular morning, I with one hand I was under the water trying to find the rope, and I looked opposite direction. And that moment when the sun rays were reflecting on the surface of the water, I stopped for like few seconds, you know, and I remember as a kid that moment that nature was speaking. It was speaking in so many voices: the creek, the sun rays, the coldness. So much information was speaking to me, you know, and you can imagine what happened a few years later when Whitney's song spoke to me, you know, that emotional, the nature feeling on my body, together with some first steps in composition through Whitney's songs, it started all to come together. Yeah, and that's how it...
Absolutely. You know, I think it might be nice to listen to just a short excerpt from your piece, Northern Lights, because that could start us talking a little bit about how you took this imagery. Imagery is a poor word. This was in your pores. This was in your fiber at this point. And I think this is what I'm not going to say think, I know that's what I hear in your music. So let's actually play that excerpt from Northern Lights, and then we'll talk a little further. Well, there's so much to say from that excerpt. I think I'll just let you start, and then I'll follow suit.
I once asked my grandmother, how many times you have seen Northern Lights in your life? And she said, only once. Only once in her 90 years long life. And when somehow idea fell into my creativity, I decided, let me see what's very special about these Northern Lights. I hadn't seen them, so I traveled to the northern Norway, like from Riga to Oslo, from Oslo to Tromsø. In 5 hours, I was there. Beyond Arctic Circle. And so I rented a car, and every night drove out of the city in dark place and waited. And then the lights came as a very calm greenish belt in the sky. And then they started to warm up, and the fire and the rays and the corona above your head, and witnessing this vast manifestation in the sky. Actually, it's the largest atmospheric phenomena in the earth. Yeah, rainbow, sun dogs, moon dogs at night, halo. Yes, these are similar phenomena, but not so wide. And then I made a decision. I want to write a symphony about the Aurora Borealis. I decided not to write a 40-minute symphony just using my emotions, my imagination, but I wanted to honor those nations who have been living for ages under the Aurora belt, because they had their own stories. Countries living close to equator, they don't have such stories about Aurora. Yeah, but those people there in the north, they have folk songs, they have weather sayings, weather beliefs, they have different legends, myth, yeah. And I thought, well, let me be less selfish and write a symphony where I am honoring those stories, those nations, and the symphony thus would also turn into educational material. Yeah. With filming crew, I went in 3 expeditions to Iceland, Greenland, Norway, Alaska, where I broke my leg finally. When everything was already filmed and we were ready to return home in 2 days, I fell on the glacier and I broke my leg.
I actually saw that in the documentary. I remember seeing I saw the excerpt from the hospital. I mean, what the old American saying, no pain, no gain, but that's an unfortunate way to do it. Well, anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, but you also say, before the concert, you also say, break a leg.
Break a leg.
And I physically broke my leg in Alaska. But yes, so before the expedition started, at that time I was a fellow commoner in creative arts in Trinity College, University of Cambridge in UK. Mm-hmm. And I went to the university library and I read about 150 books about the Northern Lights. Most of them were scientific explanations and calculation, all these things. But what I was looking for in those books was usually the first chapter. Northern Lights in history, Northern Lights in folklore, and that's where I learned. I got this education about the folklore, Northern Lights. Actually, I became quite sad when I arrived to those places in those northern countries, and I was searching for those people who would sing their folk song that I read about in those books. They would tell me these stories. I found out that I had come 100 years late. Those stories mostly were gone from those nations. In most of the meeting moments with these people, actually, I knew much more than they did about the Northern Lights.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, you see, it was the sad part of those expeditions that, I mean, so it gave us even more this honest feeling towards those, honoring these people and their heritage, and we filmed them. And in the symphony, I have about 25 storytellers, yeah, from these different nations. And from time to time, they're in those particular moments in the symphony, suddenly they appear on the screen and they sing and they narrate their legend. Yeah, and it took me 4 years to create this symphony. But of course, we filmed more than I could include in the 40-minute symphony. And I felt I still want to use the leftovers, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I composed 2 choral songs. One was Northern Lights, which has actually Latvian folk song in it.
Mm-hmm.
Cik naksnīnas predziemēli, vedi da 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 da. And the other one is called Rivers of Light, which has 2 Sami people, Ēriks.
Yoiks, is that the name of a particular kind of folk song or a poem, or what is that?
Yes, a Ērik is a very special folk song. It's hard also to notate it because every singer has his or her own folk songs. They can yoik about everything, about the sunrise, about the how do I feel now in the field working, yeah, and they just yoik, and it's very personal, very individual, yeah.
It's a sung expression of the moment, is what you're saying, and that no matter, and being individual, it can be what it is for any given person, not necessarily a collective song. Is that true?
Yes, so it's you know, comparing Latvian folk songs and Sami yoiks, Latvian folk songs are written. We have about 1 million folk songs. Goodness. And I don't know how many, like 10,000, 20,000 tunes that you can take the lyrics of 1 million folk songs and combine with these tunes, folk tunes, yeah. But for Sami people, yoik is something that is created by a person on the spot, and next week that person will sing a variation of that, you know. So that's the difference. But where I got these 2 Sami yoiks, I met in Tromsø in Norway a Norwegian musicologist who was very passionate about Sami heritage, and he had these recorded from 1980s recorded yoiks by 2 Sami people, and I just very precisely wrote down on the music paper what I heard in those recordings, and I incorporated these 2 yoiks in the Rivers of Light.
Well, the other part of that video, which I think is going to be very interesting to people who are watching, are the glasses, and then in the hands, what are these?
Handbells or chimes, yeah. Mm-hmm. All versions are welcome.
They just happen to use those. Okay. But it's not common to go to a concert at least not that I'm aware of, and necessarily see glasses with water in people's hands who are actually attempting and are creating a beautiful sound, but at various pitches and so forth. Tell us a little bit about that with this piece.
You know, I didn't invent glass harmonica. Mozart already had it in one of his pieces. But Salt Lake vocal artist, conductor Brody Allred, one day he wrote me email and invited me to write a piece for his choir, approximately 5 minutes, a cappella. And he gave me complete freedom, you know.
How fun.
That's, you know, he said that his choir can sing everything, yeah, preciseness in the intonation, quality in tone, divisi up to 12 voices, or and even freedom to choose text, you know.
Oh, wow.
I love these offers, these commissions, because then I have a feeling that with my widest, with my largest wings, I can go as high as possible in my imagination. Yeah, these wings of freedom, they take me to the highest orbits of my imagination, and so there are no limitations. I haven't been put in a cage of limitations. Yes, there are sometimes these limitations when a conductor would say, please don't do tenors divisi, or second bass doesn't sing lower than F. Yeah, I will try to do my best, but still when I have these moments of complete freedom, it's different feeling. Yeah, and so that was Christmas time with my family, my wife, and at that time we had already 2 children, I think. Yeah. So we traveled to the countryside, my native town, and after the Christmas dinner, I said to my mom, don't worry about the dish, I will wash the dish. Yeah. Before that work, I decided to go out and just breathe some fresh air. And at that night, at that moment, the night sky was very special, you know. For the first time in my life, I had a feeling that I could see deep into the sky, kind of three-dimensional, and I could feel atmosphere, something, a sound, something. It was freezing, it was snow, it was dark, but the stars were very bright. So with this feeling, I went in and started to wash the dish. Of course, the wine glasses, wet wine glasses in the sink. And I was in a happy mood, and I put some water in one of the glasses, and I rammed the glass, and it sounded, yes, glass harmonica sound. And it was oh, you know, that sound was very similar to the feeling I had a few minutes earlier, outside gazing to the stars. And that's how I started to think, what if I write a song for Brady's choir with glass harmonica? But how many the glasses? They can do the different pitches. So I took another glass and different amount of water. I called my wife Ines to come to the kitchen. Here's your glass. Here's my glass. Let's play duo. So we listened. She liked it. She was surprised about this idea. And then I took the third glass and called the oldest daughter, Emily, come to the kitchen, play trio. At that moment, the idea was born that the piece for Brady's choir will have water-tuned glasses. And I started to think about the lyrics, where to find the lyrics. So I went to the most popular library in the world, which is called Google. And I typed in poems about stars, night, winter, and Sarah Teasdale appeared there. Sarah Teasdale and the stars. And that's how it started.
We have that as an excerpt. So let's take a brief listen to part of this piece entitled Stars. So now I get to ask some of my favorite questions, because that piece, there are so many things. Some of our listeners will be familiar with a composer by the name of Olivier Messiaen. And there's a piece, well, it's a big work that he wrote, the Turingalia Symphony. The fifth movement, and this is where I'm moving to, is entitled The Joy of the Blood of the Stars. It's not entitled The Joy of the Stars. It's not entitled The Blood of the Stars, but rather the joy coming from the inner substance that brings the life to the star. I love the movement. It's thrilling. But what has always captivated me is that title. It's that title. Every time I look at it, I think Messiaen was so clear about he was moving in to find what the inner workings were that caused these stars to be joyful. When I very first listened to this excerpt, it's immediately what I thought of. It's not at all the same orchestration or even the same demeanor. However, the sense that I got about it listening was that that was what you were looking for. What is that inner substance? The other thing that made me think about that, Ēriks, was that, you know how on some of your choral works you have a short bio, and people ask, and you see yourself, I'm putting words in your mouth now, but as a harmonist. And I was thinking about that phrase from Bach when he said, my favorite instrument to play is the viola. Well, why? Because I'm sitting on the inside of the harmony. And I just wanted to put those things back to you, because when I've listened to stars and parts of Northern Lights, I thought, that's exactly what I feel. I feel like I'm sitting in both movement and stasis simultaneously. Absolutely incredible. But if I were to if I had to get up and begin a lecture on one of your pieces, I'd have to draw a picture. And it would be motion and stasis and silence. I mean, can you fire away with that? Because I'm just giving you some my reactions to those things were quite intense. And I thought, maybe this is a line of thought that you do go for.
Oh, Messiaen, he's one of my inspirations, because in his harmony there is a lot of bravery. He was brave to create these complex chords, and still it's not a cacophony. No, his chords are very intense, but there is beauty. So I studied his approach, and at the same time, quarter from the end of times, cello and piano, it's complete E major, so tonal moment, The same I can say about Michael Finnissy, new complexity style composer. Yeah, his approach through the very complex patterns, rhythmical patterns, musical patterns in his compositions, but still there is a lot of life, pureness, emotional picture. Yeah, so I was very happy to have these two wonderful colleagues from whom I learned a lot. Otherwise, my first compositions that I wrote for my church choir, if I would stay in that tonal, very simple tonal techniques, you know, that wouldn't be good. But through these smart men, I learned a lot. And actually, you know, sometimes I tell my students at Music Academy that stars is my sugar music. Yeah, because it's tonal. It's tonal. But coming back to your question, you know, the chords, every single moment, what human ear hears more is the extremes, the first soprano, second bass. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But our ears are in trouble to analyze what's going in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in this magical world where the viola is sitting, speaking with the words, yeah, of Bach. Yes, and that's where I get very passionate. Yeah, the melody always will be audible. Yeah, the bass line also will be audible, but the secret is in the middle. Second altos, first altos, both tenors, baritone, yeah, second soprano. You see, that's where you can paint your story on your musical canvas with these pastel colors, yeah, the colors between colors, yeah, and that's where those nuances will start to bloom. That's important. That's it in my life. It started with simple chords for Whitney songs, but when I learned Messiaen and Michael Finnissy and others in the professional education at Music Academy, that's where the real compositional longing started. Yeah, I loved it, that process.
And yet, that longing is in Whitney's chords.
Amen.
And you were able, I would contend that even at that tender age, you were able to hear that, and that was a response that was already long implanted in you. That's something that I found fascinating as I listened, because there is a certain continuity, is not quite the right word, but you can hear that voice of yours painting those colors, not unlike the cross stitch behind you on the wall. Yeah, I mean, as we've commented, I mean, this cross stitch back there is simply gorgeous. But again, like we're talking about now, there are very distinct bold colors, and then there are intermediary colors that help transition between them. And that's what I was talking about when I heard that. Given that, I want to just talk with you a minute about the title and choosing a title of a piece, because you've been talking about your reactions and how nature has affected you, and absolutely. But simply the words stars, when your audience walks in the door and they open up a program, everyone's going to have, like the yoke, they're going to have their own reaction, image, thought to the title. Does that ever affect what you might choose for instrumentation? You hear a voice that you know to be the truth. You pull it in. But do you ever consider what might a general populace be considering about this? How do they see? Well, not unlike what your description is with the Northern Star, with the Northern Lights, pardon me. You know, your grandmother had seen them once. You had to go much further north for them to be, as it were, commonplace in people's lives. Can you talk about that for a minute? What with the title and how that might affect what you think about a piece?
One of my weaknesses is that I am not able to write a poem, words, a poem. Yeah, that's my weakness. I have tried, I didn't like it. So I decided, that's the field that I will not step in. When I start to compose a new work, which will have lyrics, so that's where I really work hard. I spend hours and hours. Sometimes I go back to Cambridge, fantastic university library, to search for the lyrics. Yeah, and the title will come from the poets, not from me. Yeah, that's one thing. Another thing is coming back to the harmony, the chords. Every single chord needs time, so the chord can bloom in the good quality. Yeah, I cannot heard the harmony faster, when the chords become more complex with polyphonic layers, there even I really every single phrase in my compositions I play hundreds of times on my piano. So I polish, I find the right tempo, how these chains of chords, what is the best tempo, so every single verticality have time to bloom. Yeah. That's the most hardest compositional moment, because I sit at this piano here and I play it again and play it. I keep polishing the chord so it's not too transparent, it's not too thick. So what is the best that I can do, using my knowledge, using my ears, my imagination, and this polishing process takes days. Yeah. And then when we built this house 10 years ago, and it's in a countryside, and the neighbors, they found out that I was a composer. They said to me, Ēriks, when you compose, then open your windows and we will be working in our garden and we will be hearing your wonderful, beautiful tones and melodies and we will enjoy them. And I thought, oh my goodness. They didn't know that every single phrase is played hundreds of times. And if they will hear me doing this, next time they will say me, and Ēriks, when you compose, then close your windows, please.
Oh, now, that makes me want to go back really quick because, even it's such a normal thing in a sense, because even the wine glasses, you didn't go magically discover that one day, out in the snow. You did that because you were doing a work-a-day job of washing dishes, just a very normal process, but you were attuned to what it could do.
Jim, the right answer about the glasses is thanks to my mom, who didn't have dishwasher. That's the right answer.
I love it. Well, okay, given that, I want to switch over a little bit and bring in a different piece, because now this one is strictly instrumental. It's entitled The Voice of the Ocean. And I've got several different excerpts, which I thought would go into what we've been talking about, but bring in different instrumentation and how you pull that with an orchestra with no choir in that case. So we'll go ahead and play the excerpts now from The Voice of the Ocean. Well, Ēriks, I will have to admit, I went to your website. I'd never heard this piece before, and I was astounded. Living out here on Cape Cod, however, I'm a native Kansan, so we didn't grow up with oceans. Living out here for 30 some odd years now, having spent some time, I was shocked at the musical translation of the voice of what I have come to hear living here. And should we say the opening motive didn't go unnoticed either. Bach would be indeed proud. But I just want you to, I'm going to just read a couple of notes I made, which I'd love for you to just chat about. You can hear the force of wave development. You experience a time in there where the sea is glassy still. I mean, you've got a marvelous percussionist who knows how to do a tremulant on a triangle. You have the wind at the beach. You can experience the depth of the water from just a few inches to thousands of feet. Did you go through a similar process as you did with the Northern Lights in terms of study? What inspired this?
You know, when when I was standing in the most northest point of Alaska, Barrow Town, I was standing on the last centimeters of the land and facing north, and I was watching those waves, and the locals had warned me, be careful, the polar bears can come out even from the waters. But I was just facing this north, knowing that there is no more land, and it's just this ocean. The vastness, there is very few animal. Yeah, there is this these stones, tundra, wind, snow, coldness, kind of emptiness, but this vastness. That's why this piece has long melodic lines, and also the chains of chords. They are not in a rush. They take their time because it's not the sea of insects, which I experienced in Hong Kong when I climbed up its hill. Yeah, it was constantly insects. Yeah, but there in Alaska and also in Iceland, Greenland, in those expeditions, I was facing these northern waters, And that's where the human feet had to stop. You know, the dimension of water begins there. And with this very, very humble feeling, and how to explain this ocean, these waters into music, I was very afraid, and I thought how to start, you know, and I just sat on my piano, and I had to have some kind of impulse, and then I ta-da-da, you know, and that's how it all started. That's how I started to knit this painting of ocean. Ocean has a voice. Sometimes it's the whale voice. Sometimes it's seabird's voice. Sometimes it's voice of a storm. Sometimes it's voice of a lonely person watching over the waters, standing on the coastline. You know, very, very specific colors, and yeah, and I just let it go this way. That's how I didn't break into these colors, like I didn't start new stories during the piece. No, it was just the pure ocean, how I felt it, how I saw it.
It's a great combination, actually, organ, strings, and percussion, to hear those various colors, because, and if I may say it this way, the lack of the brass, because it sets the ear so differently in the context of even the biggest sections of the piece. But I want to return to that opening impulse for just a moment, because again, you know, organists will know it as the opening of the toccata and fugue in D minor. The general populace might know it as the theme from Rollerball from many, many years ago. I mean, that Hollywood has used that so many times. But it carries a certain impact. Well, it just carries a certain social impact, truly, because it is so broadly famous and collectively used. So when I listened to it, and I grabbed hold of this is also based on Sarah Teasdale's poetry, correct? I saw the ships go down, because the impact of that motive said more. I have a hard time putting words to exactly what it said, but that type of full organ sound and then a timpani stroke absolutely got my attention. And then when I saw this text, which I didn't see until after I'd listened to the piece, I saw the ships go down, wrecked in the angry seas. I thought, aha, I had that sense, didn't know though that was the inspiration behind it. But obviously you did. You had that text in your mind. So when you actually were composing it, had you found that text earlier, or was that a text you thought appropriate to go with this piece?
You know, who remembers that?
I gotcha. I knew there'd be something. Here we go.
Yeah, you know, thanks God there are musicologists who help composers to understand their work, who help people to understand what the composers have had in the mind and what techniques they have been using, you know.
But Ēriks, if I may, you just actually answered a bigger question that I think is is genuinely important. It was just part of your being. It was part of your being. And
Well,
out of
that's,
you. I mean, am I putting words in your mouth, or is that true?
um, you know, thanks to COVID, I became a doctoral student, finally. I wanted to do my doctors straight after my master's, but my teacher, Latvian composer Selga Mence, she suggested, Ēriks, you have been constantly studying, 7, 8 years. Why don't you now do a pause of studies and just write music? And I did. I followed her suggestion. I really enjoyed it for 20 years. And then came COVID, and whole world stopped. No travels, no performances. And I thought, what shall I do? And I decided to become a student of doctoral program. And I decided to study importance of imagination in creativity. Yeah. And so, one of things was that surprised me a lot was that we are not able to think 2, 3 different thoughts parallelly in the same moment. It's only one thought that we can deal with. Yeah. It's a fascinating thing, but also it's our burden, so to speak. Yeah, I wish we would be more like computers, capable like to create and parallel. No, it's just single rope in your mind. Yeah, and also another topic was that this single thought runs in time. Yeah, and my doctoral paper is about this imagination and creativity as I was composing my first ballet. Yeah, and the ballet will be premiered in 26 here in Riga National Ballet. You see and how to deal with this single rope in your mind and the time it runs in. And somehow the answer to these obstacles that every human being is living in. So the answer to this is you have to be honest with yourself. Honest. So, which means that don't lie. Speak it as it is. Your true emotions, your knowledge of the skills that you have learned, yeah, the professionalism, be it you are the pilot or you are a doctor or you are a scientist or composer or painter. So use these professional skills as much and as professional as you can. But at the same time, also be yourself. Be honest. Don't lie in your work. No, somehow I came to this this simple answer. What's actually the purpose of what you are doing?
Absolutely. You've just united so many different factors. I'd actually like to return to your grandmother, because you're talking about uniting of imagination, creativity, and an honest heart. And I think I'd like to go and now listen to your in Paradisum, and I believe I'm saying this correctly, that you dedicated this to your grandmother. Is that right?
Yes,
And
and
go ahead.
and on the day when the piece was premiered, that morning she passed away.
Wow. That we had no idea. That the piece itself, I've got an excerpt we're going to play, Ēriks. It's from the middle of the work to show a little bit of how it's set up in a room with the choir, the viola, and the cello, just to give us some sense about it, and then we can talk further. Honestly, it's a little hard to know where to begin. That we've performed that work, Gloria Dei Cantores has, and it has always been an experience that almost defies description, particularly the voice of the cello and the viola and the distance, but what the distance does in terms of bringing the room together. So I'd love it if you just start and talk a little bit about the piece and perhaps even some of the conversation you had in mind about with the two instruments, between the two instruments, with the choir.
Yeah, in Paradisum, you know, that's it. This is a heritage, yeah, from the life of the church. When a person has passed away, it's a moment to say goodbye to that person. So very, very personal and very sad moment. And in Paradisum, it has this traditional Latin text. But there are a lot of moments when the choir is just singing, humming, and the instruments play a melody. You know, there are some these very, very special moments in our lives when lyrics fade out, when we don't need lyrics. And this moment in Paradisum, it's one of these moments, you know, when there is no need for lyrics. The idea is clear, why we have gathered here. And let our memories speak. Let our visual imaginations from our past speak, and that warms our heart. Yeah, and why I have two instruments there in the piece. Why viola has been put in a balcony, hidden from audience. Because still on that farewell day, there is still this dialogue, yeah, with that person who is in the heaven, or still for the last minutes with us together. We still communicate, yeah, and cello is playing on the stage and the viola is echoing. And then it's opposite. Viola is speaking for a moment and the cello is echoing. Yeah. And the choir is humming the landscape harmonies, yeah, of this atmosphere. We don't need lyrics for those moments. Yeah.
And, you know, as you talk about that, even in hearing this and our exchange right now, it passes beyond words. you know, you talked about the traditional Latin text, and this text, of course, is the end of the funeral service, and asking for the guidance of the angels into heaven, something that I know our listeners, if they don't know it, will want to look up. A very particular moment, to be sure. But in listening to your piece and what you just said about the communication still continuing, it's like there's a thin place in the veil between heaven and earth, now and future. And I asked the question with all sincerity, were you aware of your grandmother's condition as you were composing the work? So
she was in hospital,
mm-hmm.
and a lot of memories came through.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I was not able to include all of them. Yeah, she was my. I was thinking, what's the difference between her and my mom? Yeah, so and my mom, she helped me. You know, we lived in the Soviet time. We didn't have enough money, never enough. But still, she was able to save some money. So every winter holiday, every summer holiday, I was with a group going on excursion, be it Moscow, be it Leningrad, countryside, parks, yeah, sea with tents. So you see, my mom wanted to show me the world. My grandmother, she didn't travel anywhere because she had cow, pigs, chicken. Yeah, she was constantly there. But what I got from her was this imagination, the landscape. Her farm was so beautiful. The creek, the hay, the collecting the hay for the cow. You know, you get very dirty in it, and then you hate to take care of the potatoes, and you hate to. You love, as a kid, you love to eat strawberry, but you hate to work on the strawberry plant. Right. You know, like, right. But still, there was such a depth of life in her farm that I learned, you know, and so and the ending of Paradisum, there is a final chord, long chord, sang by the choir, and the dialogue of harmonics, cello and viola. Because that's when the house becomes empty and the metal gate is creaking in the wind.
In the wind.
No one is anymore in the house. Yeah.
Yeah.
My grandmother lived for 20 years. The last 20 years in her life, she was alone. Yeah. And we, as a grown-up grandchildren, we had our own families. We studied, we worked in another towns, cities, and she was alone there. And that's, so I painted this picture of this gate. Yeah, that's a sad moment. Yeah, but
mm-hmm.
Yeah, but the view of life I got from her, that's very, very deep in me.
It's as though she passed her own faith life on to you through that imagination.
And she actually was also, it was forbidden in Soviet time for churches to do any activities outside of their buildings. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
My grandmother, she was a Lutheran church believer, but she went to the Lutheran church in our native town maybe like twice a year. Yeah, but I remember from my childhood years that, yeah, occasionally she told me about God. She
Mm-hmm.
taught me also the Lord's Prayer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. As a kid, I remember that. Yeah.
Incredible. Well, I want to turn now to one last work, and we'll have come full circle. We're going to look at some excerpts and listen from the Nordic Symphony, and we'll talk a little bit more before we close our program.
Veit duftsins son nokkra dýrlegri sín, en drottnanna hásal í vafurloga. Sjá grund og vog undir gullkveldum boga. Hver getur nú unað við
Tā kā otra josla grib veidoties tur zemāk. Un tas ir ļoti labi. Tas jau nozīmē, ka viņa paliek aktīvāka. Redzi? Redzi? Nu jau viņi sāk tur skriet jau. Jā. Tā kā rakstītu, vai ne? Viens uz papīra raksta. Super!
Ēriks, I think this is actually a very timely work to close our discussion this afternoon, largely because of your grandmother. Because she opened your imagination as your mother opened your world for travel. And when I started watching this work, and the reason these particular clips was to give our audience some level of not only of the impact of the work, but as I heard in your TED Talk, you called it multimedia, and indeed in the title, i.e., you can find music in all of the elements, and that's what you were doing. I would just love for you to talk about the work a little bit longer.
Technically, 40-minute long piece. My brain was too short to keep all the compositional process in mind. So I occupied our dining table. I put a long paper on the table, and I technically made measurements on it. Like 1 centimeter was like 10 seconds. Yeah. So, and I was calculating. Yeah. If the solo violin is playing there, it should appear also somewhere later. So, and I can draw arch. If the choir is appearing here, there, again I can draw arch. So and so this approach helped me because to avoid of kaleidoscopy, kaleidoscopic. Yeah, no, it's symphony. It has to have its dramaturgy, yeah, because 25 storytellers appearing from time to time on the screen, singing folk song, saying what they're saying, or legend, yeah. I had to be very careful, you know, because the priority was a symphony, symphonic scale, symphonic qualities, yeah. So I used this technical approach, calculation, and for such a long piece there has to be at least 2 climax moments, yeah, and the final is the largest one, of course. So technical professional knowledge to use there, but at the same time also, you know, the soul, how I felt, what was my reaction to these stories. And also I was quotating these folk songs, so what kind of accompaniment should I write during those moments? And I decided to use this honesty, honoring these materials, so not breaking them, not cutting them into the pieces, but allowing these inherited materials to be heard and seen in full power, yeah. And my orchestra around them is just like a shadow to them, yeah. And you know, when we hear in silence, we can hear more, yeah. When there is still left a tiny spot for something else imagined, that's a wonderful feeling. I think when I am not like bravely and coming and occupying all the territory of the music, yeah, as art on the stage, no, with this humble attitude, I have constantly left space for imagination. People in audience, they are educated people. They have their own stories. I don't want to arrive into their lives, into their imaginations with my tractor, you know, with a power. No. I am there telling, speaking about something, and to my surprise, this something speaks to them very well. You know, I say this with very humble attitude, you know, but and I have been thinking about that. Why is this so? I think it's because I think maybe this secret is hidden in the Baltic choral sound. Maybe because Baltic choral sound is a mixture of Latvian folklore, of German loud choral singing, which was 100 years ago, because Germany was ruling over Latvia for 700 years. And then we also had Russia ruling over us. So we learned from basso profundo singing, Rachmaninov type, deep voice, big voice singing colors. Yeah. And then after Second World War, somehow few of our conductors were allowed to travel to Scandinavia, and they learned head voice from the Swedish choirs. Yeah. They were surprised, how these Swedish sopranos and Swedish tenors can sing in the high octave pianissimo with this beautiful timbre, yeah. And so, and you see, after Second World War, all these different colors were put together in our few best choirs, thanks to these 2-3 conductors, and they started to show that the choral sound actually can be something more. The choir can have all the colors of symphony orchestra, or all the colors of the painters on the canvas. So the choir sound became what we call today Baltic sound, Baltic choral sound. Yeah, so this, and also these Whitney Houston chords, they need time to bloom in space, yeah. And so you see, this time is important in my work. I do listen and I play on my piano and I close my eyes and I start to, I try to guess when is the time for the next section, how to finish it. And also, like, artistically, the real art happens at the endings, not at the beginnings. The beginning is like da-da-da, da-da-da, yeah. But then how to develop it, and how you will interpret the ending, yeah, and then comes the next movement, yeah. So it's listening, and you better wait than head forward.
Well, speaking of time, you have been extraordinarily generous with yours. And we just can't thank you enough. It's incredible.
I'm a very talkative person, I must admit.
Well, so am I. And so this is a good match in terms of a discussion. But thank you so much, Ēriks, for sharing not only your compositional process, but, well, you just flatly, you opened up your heart to all of us. And we cannot thank you enough. It's been it's beyond inspirational, because it teaches all of us that composers are human, but composers hear things, and what you offer to us is a way for us to be human and for our story to join yours. So again, on behalf of Arts Empowering Life and our Art Speaks series, thank you for joining us today, and I hope we will have another chance at some point to visit.
Thank you, Jim, for this wonderful opportunity. You inspire me. What can I say? I love your questions, yeah, and they are wonderful questions. They make me to think, to rethink, to keep watching, and to keep writing next works. Thank you.
And what a good combination. Well, God bless you, and have a great rest of your evening, and we'll be in touch.
Amen.
Amen. Take care.
Thank you.